As an MMO Dungeon Master, you'll find that few things are more difficult than actually running combat itself. So there's a couple things I strongly recommend. The first is you always want to have a plan for your battle encounters when you're the DM. And the second is you want to be ready to throw those plans out in a moment's notice. Some people are better at going off the seat of their pants than others when it comes to running combat, and usually that typically comes from years of experience. But when it comes to being an MMO Dungeon Master, it's a bit difficult, you know. One of the things that I always say about 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons is that, you know, you have multiple books, you have a good variety of rules and resources to pull from, you know, and few games require you to read books before you can play them nowadays, right? So, you know, it gets easy when you're used to the system, but it's daunting going into it. However, with 5th edition, you have 20 levels worth of balancing. When it comes to running an MMO and, you know, as far as being a Dungeon Master in an MMO guild, it's a bit different because you don't have 20 levels worth of balancing. You don't have tons of books to help you out. Unless you're strictly running a 5th edition, which is pretty rare in MMO since most people are turned off by that prospect. Most of the time, people are running their own homebrew dice system, whether it's a D20, a D1000. They typically are all homebrew, and so what you want to do is you want to make sure that you plan your battle encounters. If anything, you want to make sure you plan your boss. You want to have a cool boss with a neat narrative that they fit into. Maybe they're the, you know, the pirate lord that the players have been going after for a while now. And so you want to make sure that you plan it out. And so I recommend typically writing down a few things. Some health, their damage dice roll, and whatever special skills they have. So, for sake of illustration, I brought along my friend known as the Pirate Lord. There he is. There's the Pirate Lord. And so what do we have here? Well, pretty easy. We have HP 10. And so, of course, in my system, and I have a video on, you know, battle systems and everything, everyone deals 1 point of damage if their attack lands. So D20 plus 5, that's their roll for everything, for damage and stuff like that. And then I have their skills. Anyone that attacks in melee has to roll a saving throw, you know, versus frost, or potentially lose their next turn. And I'll talk about that in the issue of balancing in a minute. And then I have another thing, point blank LE. So if players are grouped together, this Pirate Lord, he can throw some icicles at them and hit both of them at once. And then finally he fights with an axe and frost spell. So I got to roll down right here. It's the good old Pirate Lord. I planned for it, right? So what happens? So the time comes that your players are all gathered, you know, and so maybe you say you're playing on 5 people showing up. So 10 health points, right? Sounds good. Everyone has a chance to hit them a couple times, roughly, give or take. Someone's going to miss inevitably. Someone's going to hit extra inevitably, you know, and maybe you thought about action economy, but, you know, that's kind of difficult. So let's say that we go into it one night. We have our good old Pirate Lord. We plan our combat, and it sounds cool. The Pirate Lord, he has an axe, some cool frost spells. You know, he talks with an accent. He's real rough. He's going to be moving around the stage. It sounds cool. We have a mobile enemy. It's colorful. We're in a frosted ice cove. We've just maybe fought through a slew of pirates, and here comes the final encounter. And what starts happening? Well, combat begins, right? Everyone rolls their initiative, and then the players start attacking. Like, okay, this is going to be fun. This is challenging. They'll figure out these mechanics, and they'll start to really like it. So, your party's warrior goes running in with her axe. Just like the pirate has an axe, the warrior has an axe of their own. They take a swing, and they miss because they rolled a 4. But then, you remember the frost enchantment, so you make that warrior roll a frost save, and they have to roll right here a 15 or higher or lose their next turn. So, the warrior begrudgingly rolls their frost save, and they roll a 4 again. They've lost their next turn. We have the mages, and the mages, they begin casting their spells out at the Pirate Lord. But the thing is, they're standing side by side. They haven't moved. So the Pirate Lord, he manages to get some distance, and he sees the mages. He doesn't have to worry about the warrior. He sees the mages, and he casts those ice shards at them. And they all have to beat his roll. And so I roll his dice, which is a D20 plus 5. He rolls a nat 20. And the mages, I think, okay, well, I'm not going to have them auto hit. Maybe I'll give them a chance to defend themselves to some degree. Both mages rolled a 3. They both take 1 point of damage, and they only have 3 hit points total, so they're going to drop pretty fast. The rogue goes slinking through the shadows. He comes up behind the Frost Lord, and he goes for his powerful sneak attack, and he rolls a 2. And then you start seeing this pattern set in as you're, playing through this combat. The players make an attempt, and they fell. the mages aren't quite realizing they have to split up, or maybe they're too focused on getting out a really good spell or trying to help someone else that they're together, and they get blasted down real fast. Your warrior, they go up to the boss and they keep trying to swing, and every time they keep missing, and they lose their next turn. And then your rogue, he's getting his face beat in over and over by the Pirate Lord's axe, and it's just a mess. And then you start realizing, as this is going through, you're like, Pirate Lord's kicking my guy's ass. Shit. Pirate Lord's going to kill him. So what do? You need to be ready to throw those plans out in a moment's notice, which is part 2 of what I want to get at. As the Dungeon Master, you have full control over that boss. I've kind of seen at times when someone's unleashed an extremely powerful, overpowered boss that has a total party kill inadvertently, and as it starts drawing near that kind of inevitable conclusion, you see the handwriting on the wall, so to speak, the Dungeon Master's like, oh man, well, that was a little bit too difficult than I thought. I didn't expect it to go like this at all. Well, the Dungeon Master's in control of it. So there's a few things you can do to escape. One is, you see this? You can get rid of this. You can toss it out. I typically keep track of health points on here, and I'll start crossing, down from 10 to 9 to 8, 7, and I'll just start writing that in. However, you can just toss that out. If you think the Pirate Lord's taking enough damage and maybe the party's not going to hang on that much longer, just go ahead and have him die. Or have him get wounded enough that he decides, well, it's time for me to make me exit, and he goes bolting off in the distance. Why? Because survival makes sense to every living creature. Most living creatures are not brave enough to push past their limits for survival if they sense the end of their mortality is near, right? They have that sense that, oh man, I'm about to die. They're typically going to run away, right? And so it's very common for enemies when wounded to run away if you really need them to. And have a plan B. And that's very important too. So say the Pirate Lord starts beating the rear ends. He's taking no damage. There's no good reason for him to leave. The party's rolling terrible. The Pirate Lord, he's rolling 20s and 18. Sometimes you might want to have a plan for, okay, I've knocked him out. Now let's lock him up and throw him in the cages. And then he has some of his servants come over and grab him, his other pirate friends, and grab the party members and throw them in a cage. And now you have a plan for your next event in a week or whenever it is. I have a plan B. Maybe he leaves. Maybe he realizes they're pathetic and he sends other allies after them. Or maybe you just realize that as cool as this is, you don't need to have all this. And maybe you need to retweak it. The D20 plus 5 is pretty good. And maybe the Pirate Lord's getting really lucky. The players don't need to know these numbers. They don't need to know the stats. They don't need to know the health points. The Pirate Lord needs to have as many health points as you need them to have, whatever situation he's in. You can reduce this to 4 if the fight's gone on long enough and he's only taken 4, bits of damage. Make it very weak and want to retreat or something like that. And then things like balancing, right? So the point blank AoE, that's pretty cool. He's got sweet axe and frost spells. Maybe you want to change that. The melee save versus frost is a pretty cool idea. It makes sense, but losing an entire turn if you fail to save, just a side note, players typically don't like losing turns in your game. It can be very frustrating if they're just sitting there and not playing at the table, so to speak, the MMO virtual table. So maybe not in losing turns, maybe you change that and go, instead of losing a turns at a fail save, they get a -4 on their next roll for an attack. So always plan your encounters. Have something fun. Think of the environment, cool mechanics. People are used to, when it comes to MMO combat, they're used to rolling, typing an attack emote and rolling their dice. And then the enemy rolls to defend it. And then the enemy attacks and the player rolls to defend. Back and forth. They're used to that. That's the standard. So when it comes to your bosses and stuff, maybe have a cool Pirate Lord. Come up with some skills of your own. Maybe instead of frost, he uses fire. Maybe certain places of the environment begin to light up with flames, and if the players are not moving out of them carefully and predicting where they're going to be, they could take damage from exploding flames from underground. Things like that. So always have a plan. Always be ready to throw those plans out in a moment's notice. There's the Pirate Lord. Hope it's been helpful. There's a playlist on the screen. Well, I'm not sure where it's going to be. There's going to be a playlist on the screen. Maybe it's going to be right over my face or something like that. I'll decide when the time comes. I don't know. Hope it's been helpful.